Well, hey, money lover, I have something very special for you today. My guest is Rachel Donnelly, drawing on her own personal experience of loss, which I hope she'll talk a little bit more about today, including the passing of her parents. Rachel Donnelly founded AfterLight with a goal to assist clients in managing the unavoidable administrative tasks associated with after loss and legacy planning. She's also the co-founder of Professionals of After Loss Services, acronym PALS, the first organization setting industry standards for after loss professionals. And if you've been through this process with someone that you loved, I know that you know what Rachel does is in high demand, or should be. Like, you have wanted her to walk next to you. In her role with PALS, she plays a critical role in creating the PALS training program, which is an innovative online course shaping skilled professionals worldwide. Rachel, welcome to Love Your Money.
Thanks so much, Hillary. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, you sure have a unique role in life, and your website says that you help the living deal with dying.
Yes.
This is a very unique place to put yourself. Can you say a little bit
Yeah.
about what led you to this career and set of services?
Yeah, it's so, it's interesting looking back at your life in retrospect. I feel like my whole life was sort of leading up to this, and it was just one day hit me in the head if this was what I was meant to do. My dad was a small town doctor. I grew up in a small town on the south side of Atlanta, and he was the only doctor in town. So I accompanied him on house calls, going to the hospital with him, and so it was very normal to be in sort of that world. Unfortunately, he got sick when I was 13 and passed away when I was 16. And I saw my
Hmm.
mom, who was a very young widow, I was introduced to sort of these logistics of after loss and of death, of her having to sell his medical practice, of us having to file for benefits for, his veterans benefits for Social Security. So I was introduced to it at a very young age. Then fast forward when I was in my early 30s and had two young kids, my mom got sick and passed away within a couple of weeks of her diagnosis. And I
Oh,
had just started a brand new job where I had no time off in the first 90 days. And I was expected to
oh
have her
my.
funeral, settle, start, open her estate and start settling her estate, as well as taking on the care of her brother, my uncle, who she was the caregiver for, who was in latter stages of Parkinson's disease. So I was now thrust
Oh,
into this world of settling my parents' estate, taking care of an aging loved one, while also trying to navigate a brand new job, take care of two small kids, do the laundry, and all of the things that we as women have to do.
with no
And
time off, like on the
with no
evenings
time
and
off.
weekends?
I mean, and you work in the financial industry, you can't call organizations and banks and financial
No.
custodians on the weekend. And so I thought, why is there not someone to help me navigate this? Navigate these unavoidable logistics of what I call the business of death.
Hmm.
And yes, I had the attorney, I had the financial advisor, I had the accountant. What people, I'm sure many of your listeners know, and they're shaking their head to, is there's so much work that's thrust upon those who are left behind to settle the estate of all of that work and those other duties as assigned, those crumbs that fall between the crack that we're supposed to pick up and deal with when somebody passes away. There are varying estimates that say it takes over 500 hours of effort for an executor to settle an estate.
I usually say
So,
it's a full year part-time job.
well, and yes, and an unpaid
Yeah.
part-time job. So I thought there was a real gap in the market in terms of logistical, practical support for those navigating this journey. And one day after my uncle passed away, I was settling two estates in tandem, still my mom's and my uncle's. And I thought, oh my goodness, I've got it. I'm going to start a company that helps executors manage these logistics and serve as sort of a quarterback for
Hmm.
overwhelmed executors. And Afterlight was born.
Well, a shepherd through really. Like, I mean, what you do, I can't even imagine. And I sometimes think about hospice workers,
Yes.
right? What
Right.
angels,
Yeah.
but I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could do it.
Same here. I don't think I could either. That's a totally different part of unfortunately, this is a milestone in life we are all going to have to experience. Not all
Mhm.
of us are going to get married. Not all of us are going to have children, buy a home. We are all most likely at some point going to experience the loss of a loved one. And to have someone to shepherd you through that process as sort of a project manager, as I said, I felt that was missing in the marketplace, right? So this is something we're all going to have to face at some point in our life.
Yeah. And how many years has that been approximately?
So I'm in my 5th year of business. I started in January 2020. It was a side
Oh,
hustle while
wow.
I was a side hustle and a great timing. A side hustle as I was still working full time. And eventually I left my full-time job and said, I am going in whole hog, as we say in the South, on this business and haven't looked back.
Those Southern metaphors. And talk a little bit about your professional credentials and how you
Yeah.
use those in what you do.
I like to say I have an MDA, a Master's in Death Administration, where
Oh,
I went to the School of Hard Knocks, right? So when I first started my company, AfterLight, I didn't know what to call myself, how to refer
mhm,
myself to myself.
mhm.
Was I a death concierge? Was I an estate project manager? Was I a skilled professional assistant for executors? And I found other women who had very similar businesses to mine. We started networking, and just our one of our first orders of business is let's come up with a unified name for our role, our what we're doing to help clients so that we can really set the stage for this and build an industry. And that's where After Loss Professional was born. And we created
Oh,
people started hearing about us. They said, "Oh my goodness." And it was so funny. It was women who had gone through this experience before, had experienced what I call the dumpster fire of death, of losing a
wow.
loved one. And they said, "Could you teach me how to do what you're doing? I am I'd like to reinvent myself in the workforce. I would love to do this professionally. I'd love to take the experience that I gleaned from and start a business or add these services." So PALS, Professionals of After Loss Services, was born
Mhm.
with the goal of creating the industry, the training organization, the membership organization for those wishing to join us
Mm.
on this journey. So now we've trained people from all over the world how to do what we do and are growing this industry around, best practices, a code of ethics, things like that, so that we can really set our, have bumpers around it, sort of a sandbox of how we help clients.
Mhm. Now, and I just out of curiosity, do you have training in anything that would look like counseling or therapy? Because I imagine a lot of what you do feels like that.
It's funny. We do a lot of training around, how to be grief centric or grief literate. We
Mm.
do training around, how to um, provide these services with compassion, but we very much stay in our lane of a project management role, right? One of our first questions when
Oh, so
working
you
with
might
clients,
introduce to a grief
absolutely,
counselor.
absolutely, 100%. One of our first questions when we work with a client is, are you getting the grief support you need?
Mm.
Right. And we want to make sure that we facilitate that in whatever way makes sense. We have resources on hand to help shepherd that. We do feel also that providing these services is a form of grief support. We're giving people the time back
Mm.
to focus on the things that matter. They're not getting bogged down into closing the Xfinity account, calling the bank, yelling representative 300 times to the same person. So that's what I felt was a real missing part of my grief journey is I didn't have time
Mm.
to grieve.
No, wait, when you say they're not getting bogged down in closing the Xfinity account, are you literally doing that for people?
Yes, absolutely.
So are you acting as power of attorney?
We're not acting as power of attorney. We are acting as a authorized agent for the executor. They
Okay.
sign sort of a third-party communication form. Whoever has the legal authority, the ability, who's settling the estate, they sign just a quick, like I said, third-party authorization form that we then use to pass on to the custodian, the company, whatever, and saying the executor has asked us to reach out, find what paperwork they need to fill out, what's the process, the protocol, the sequence.
Oh,
So we
wow.
serve in both, we can serve as a coach role, as a proxy role, or an organizer role.
I'm moving my microphone closer because my neighbor has started construction on their house, of
Oh,
course, right
gracious.
now.
Of course.
Well, that is fascinating. And so what, can you give me a sense of the things, because that's miraculous, right? To not have to say my husband or wife passed away
Right.
10,000 times
Yeah.
to somebody
Yeah.
on the phone you've never met, who probably isn't in
Right.
the same country, right? So
Exactly.
what's on the list of things you can do, or conversely, what's on the list
Right.
of things you can't do for
Right.
them?
We're very clear, we're not fiduciaries.
Okay.
We do not serve in that fiduciary role for an executor. Like I said, we serve in that sort of project management role for an
Hmm.
executor. We do not provide any legal advice, guidance, because we are not attorneys. We are not CPAs. So we're very clear about where we are. What we do help them with is getting organized, prioritizing, triaging, streamlining tasks. My number one referral sources are financial advisors and trust and estates attorneys.
Hmm.
And I love having those professionals as the referrals. Then I've got sort of the laundry list that has been assigned to them. Say, I need you to call Vanguard. I need you to call E-Trade. I need you to reach out to this account. So we are helping them in sort of the execution, organization,
Okay.
and triaging of those, that sort of laundry list.
And I'm
Also,
thinking,
we're helping
go
them with
ahead.
things that they may not think of. Oh, let's help you shut down the LinkedIn account, or was there money left over in the PayPal account or the Zelle, right? We're trying to be very comprehensive and holistic, and let's zoom out, look at your loved one's life, and then
Hmm.
zoom back in and help close, transfer, archive based on the guidance of the other professionals.
And that's a topic that's, I mean, we could do a whole podcast episode on just the digital estate, but I
Oh,
do, and I want to come back to that.
yeah.
But at any point, would you sort of bow out? I'm thinking of a few people I have known recently who
Mhm.
unfortunately, let's say the interpretation of the estate plan is unclear, right? The
Mhm.
revocable living trust was written, but
Right,
it's confusing. It doesn't seem like the decedent would actually want to have happen what it seems like is happening,
right,
and it doesn't
right.
make sense for the trustee or the executor. Tell me, how far would you go if you were having to go back and forth with the estate department at Wells Fargo Bank, et cetera, et
Right.
cetera? Tell me how that goes.
Yeah, so I'll give you one example in particular. I have a client who she's the trustee of her uncle's, revocable living trust. And so I was helping her under the guidance of her attorney.
Mhm.
You need to call, you need to get the EIN for the trust. You need to call and have this account open. You need to have the assets moved into this trust account. So funding the trust. Then, we found out there are several accounts that hadn't been properly
Mm.
titled, right? So now reporting back to, of course, my client and then the attorney. Oh, now we've got to open up the estate, get the letters testamentary, then follow through that protocol so we can do, the flow through back to the trust. So it does require, if you're getting into that very detailed proxy role, of course, understanding of the basic mechanics
Mhm.
of estate planning, but we are never, providing any clarification, um, any guidance based on that. We are always looking to the attorney, to the CPA,
Or
to the
marching
financial
orders.
advisor for the marching orders. Absolutely, 100%. We're in
Okay.
sort of the execution. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I do find that, and we touched on this tangentially before I hit record, but I do find that sometimes you're looking for, often even the folks in the trust and estates department at the national banks, often
Yeah,
in my experience, and you said potentially yours, are not necessarily, and certainly not uniformly educated on
100%.
how
Yeah,
estate planning should go. And so you're getting different
absolutely.
interpretations from different people. And I just wonder, if someone pushed back on you, if you're calling the retail bank and they're pushing back on you, are you then going back to your client and or the attorney, or are you kind of poking around
I'm
trying to
always
get the
going,
result we
yeah.
want?
Both. It's both. I will push them and saying, okay, what I always try to do is ask as many questions as I can.
Mm,
Okay, so what you're telling me is X, Y, and Z. I want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly because that's not the sort of marching orders that the attorney gave me, what
mm,
have you, right? Sometimes you'll call a custodian and they'll say, well, it's a direct beneficiary account. And they'll say, well, we need the will. And well, why do you need the will? This is a direct beneficiary account. So please,
mhm.
can you clarify why you need that? So I'm always trying to ask as many clarifying questions as I can so I can go back to my client and then to the attorney to say, here's what they've said. Can you, tell me
Right.
how I need to proceed, right?
Okay.
Or they're coming back and saying, with a trust account, they're saying, oh, well, this was a revocable living trust. Well, doesn't that end at death? Don't you need to rename it? And then, no, that's not correct, but yes, okay.
Right. Yes. Yes. Okay, good. Let's talk about, um, let's say a couple of, let's say, I'm just saying, I'm trying to describe a person who would be well established with social media. So this
Right,
person has a LinkedIn, a Facebook, potentially a lightly used Instagram, maybe a
right,
TikTok, because TikTok
right,
automatically assigned me account because I have an Instagram.
right,
Um, how does someone who doesn't have the passwords
right.
begin to think about how to handle those things?
Right. So it's such a wild, wild west situation. There is no one size fits all protocol, and it's very confusing
Mm.
to the end user and to the run of the mill user or the family member who's left behind. So, when one part of helping clients is helping them to get their digital assets organized. That's one way that we help clients because we've seen this as a real blind spot. Instead of a common practice is for family members to share passwords, right, with a
Oh,
loved one and say, let me, shut this down. I want this to happen. While that may seem harmless and it is very common, it may violate the terms of service of
oh,
that custodian. Right, correct. So, well, technically, yes, that may be the fastest line to victory, right? That's not necessarily best practices in terms of what you should do. It actually may violate the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. And
so if I go in and shut down someone's Facebook who's died, I might be in violation of their terms of service.
correct.
Wow.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I tell clients to do and what I caution people is, well, first and foremost, um, I don't know that there'll be some password police that are going to be screaming around the corner to come get you, right?
Right.
But you may inadvertently end up locking yourself out, right, of an account. Let me give you a quick example. I had a client his adult son passed away very tragically. They wanted to do some digital asset discovery to maybe find out a couple of things that happened leading up to his passing, right?
Mm.
And they did not know the unlock code to his phone, computer, the email addresses he used to log into different accounts. Following the death, his brothers tried to guess the one of his passwords, and they inadvertently locked themselves out. Of course, when we went back to Google and said, "Hey, we'd like to request a transcript, a catalog of digital assets," they said, well, we can see you tried to, garner
Break in.
access after the date of death, which you reported. You've now circumvented our protocol. You are permanently locked out. That is a
Oh,
very severe case. Mind that. Let's just preface that. However, based on that experience that I've now had with clients, I want to make sure we color in the lines and follow the protocol. So doing that, one of the things that I do is let's do an inventory of all of their digital assets. Did they name any beneficiaries or contacts, delegates as part of their online accounts, which you can do with Facebook, Google, and Apple, right? Was any of that done? And if so, let's follow that process or whoever was named the contact. And then based on what you think they would have wanted, let's follow the proper procedures to close down the Facebook account, which there's a whole process of doing that. You send in the death certificate, the obituary, what have you. So following that process, same thing with LinkedIn or Instagram, what have you. So we're doing that under the the terms of service that we're following and following that proper procedure.
Following the process that they've set out.
Right.
And so this may be too in the weeds, but for example,
I love in the weeds.
Okay. Well, now I'm curious because, I do think I have a beneficiary or a next of kin on all three of the accounts and that you mentioned. In other words, every time I'm prompted for that kind of thing, I elect someone just because of my professional experience. So, but let's say my executor is not that person.
Right. Yeah.
How does that person find out who is?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And it's one thing that we scream from the highest mountain is communication. As you're going through and getting your estate in order, naming your executor, your power of attorney, your financial power of attorney, if there is any agent or delegate that's in conflict of that, whether that's your Facebook legacy contact or your Apple legacy contact, just make sure that's included somewhere, maybe a letter of instructions, right? That may not be legally binding, but it's just a letter of my executor is my husband, my son, my 20-year-old son is my legacy contact on my Apple because he's very savvy. But just making sure you're communicating that, talking to your attorney in your state, in your region of, let's see, how can I include that, right? We want to make sure it's done under your state laws, right?
I see. So you would have to communicate that out.
Yeah, just communicate that, right? And it's very simple. My husband would be my executor, my trustee. My sister is my Facebook legacy contact, right? So I've just included that in my letter of instruction saying, my sister, this differs from my other wishes and election of who will take over.
Right. Okay. All right. So thank you for that. That was very interesting. And it also sounds to me like there can't right now be a current handbook for managing the digital estate because the terms of service might change.
Yeah, well, so each state, almost all 50 states have some sort of digital asset legislation that gives executors a pathway, right? It's called RUFADA, the Revised Uniform Fiduciary Access to Digital Assets Act, which gives executors sort of a pathway. However, you still do need to check with the terms of service of each individual account, right?
Right.
But all this to say, everybody hates passwords, right? And many of the big tech companies are making it a priority over the next couple of years to go passwordless. Microsoft, Google, Apple, they're moving over to what's called passkeys. So all that to say, you may think, oh, just handing over my passwords is the answer, since many companies are moving over to this passwordless passkey format. It may be null and void anyway, right?
Oh.
So that's why I counsel clients do a very laborious inventory of all of your digital assets, just to have the record of it so that they know, what do I systematically need to close down, transfer, archive. I've gotten into the weeds a lot, but as you can see, it's fascinating to me. But your original question, no, there's no uniform step 1, step 2, step 3 of how to handle one's digital assets after you die.
Now, primarily when you meet clients, are you meeting them just before the death or after?
About 60% of my clients are in what we call the after-loss consulting. So they are the named or about to be the named executor administrator of an estate, and we're helping walk them through all of those administrative tasks. Then about 40% in what I call legacy planning and organization. They've maybe done all of their estate planning a couple of years ago. They may not understand or know where everything is. We're helping to pull everything together. We're helping them think through questions that they may not have considered, such as, do they want to be buried or cremated, or their digital assets being a big component of that. So, most of my clients are, like I said, in that after loss consulting space, but about, 40% are in what we call pre-planning.
Okay. And I imagine in pre-planning, you're probably working with the person who's going to die and the person who will be his or her executor, or
right. Yes. Let's help you get everything organized, find a central repository for you to share with your executor. Happy to sit down and have sort of a family meeting so we can share some of this information and give them the breadcrumbs of how they'll access this. Who are the important people involved? Who's the attorney? Who's the financial advisor? Making sure that they have the tools in their toolbox.
Communication. Right. Yeah.
You don't ever want to be like, surprised, you're the executor. Nobody wants it. Nobody wants that.
Surprise, here's a job for a year, what you won't get paid for.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have two primary services, I think. That's what I saw on your website.
That's correct, yes.
So you have after loss consulting. So I think we've been talking about after loss consulting.
Right.
What in your experience is the approximate duration of that engagement, and what might be the approximate range of costs?
Right. So my typical engagement with a client is about a 6-month engagement. I sell bundled hours. As we know, probate and the time to complete probate is very squishy. And sometimes you don't know the layers of the onion till you start pulling them back. However, I want to give my clients sort of a timeline of how long they'll, be working with me, and also the cost, right? So I have a bundled package of hours in 10, 20, and 30 hour packages right now. They can always buy more. And my hourly rate goes down based on the number of hours that you purchase. So my hourly rate is between $175 and $195 an hour based on the number of hours that you purchase.
Got it. Okay, so straight hourly.
Yes.
Very good. Okay, I got it. And then you also have the legacy planning services, which you mentioned. So that is for folks who know that death is nigh. Is that?
Yes and no. I've had clients who were 44. I've had clients who were 84, right? One had my 44-year-old. She was about to go under a major, surgical procedure. She said, I just want to get everything organized, make sure I can pass things along, have things buttoned up.
Isn't
she was like,
funny?
I know.
I've had people tell me they needed to get their estate plan because they were both going to Jamaica. Like,
oh, that's always, or the African safari. That's always a big one.
All of a sudden it's urgent.
All of a sudden it's urgent. Yes. But she felt really disorganized. And she said, I just want to go through this process and really get pen to paper and get organized. But so it depends. It's not all the time someone who is facing a terminal illness, although that is common, or they're in the third to fourth quarter of life, as I like to say.
Understood. Okay, so you may not in your professional role have much occasion to share with people best practices or mistakes to avoid, because it seems like when you meet them, sometimes those mistakes have already been made.
Yeah.
But if you could, because those people are listening to this conversation, what would you want people to know to get done?
Oh gosh. I mean, just even if you do a couple of things to organize your affairs. People have this common misconception that estate planning is only for wealthy. Your estate is what you owe and what you own. So doing a simple inventory of what you owe and what you own will help your family members exponentially if something were to happen to you. Because, so many things are behind an online portal that you're logging into or electronic mailing, right? We're not getting statements. So just having that, sharing what your preference is around what you want to have happen to your body. I know that is so
Mm,
morbid, but it can cause so many issues. And death is very expensive. The average cost of a burial in the US is $8,300.
oh, wow.
Is there money? Do someone have immediate access to funds if you were to pass away tomorrow to be able to pay immediate expenses, your mortgage, your, car payment, what have you, right?
Mm.
Or would they have to shoulder that burden themselves? So
Oh,
those,
I've seen that happen.
oh, it happens so often. And just, I have so many unpopular opinions about estate planning. Friends don't let friends name co-executors. Just don't do it. It's
Thank
just,
you. I totally agree.
just don't do it. I know you're trying to make, Susie and John feel like they're both equally loved,
Equal,
but
right?
it is just logistically a nightmare,
Yeah.
right? Just do not do it. Um, put your pride aside. This is your mess. This is your life. This is your legacy. Why would you want it to just go away in the blink of an eye if something were to happen to you? So just a little bit of forethought and intentionality can go such a long way.
I've said this on the show many times before, but so many times I invite new clients to upload a digital copy of their signed and executed
Yeah.
estate plan. So the
Yeah.
will, the trust document, the power of attorney, and the health directive.
Right.
And they say to me, "Oh, my attorney has that." And I said, "Okay, first of all, your attorney is a human being just like you, who will either
Yeah.
die or go out of business
Yeah.
relatively soon."
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Not only that, your attorney never told you that he or she would keep that for you on file.
100%. It's your document.
Right.
Why are you leaving it up to somebody else to safeguard?
It's your attorney is not box.com.
No. And for the love of God, do not put it in a safe deposit box. Please do not put it in a
No,
safe deposit box.
I know. I
I
know.
hope that's a thing of the past. And I'm
I,
sorry, any banking professionals who hear me, but I really hope that's going away because it
I
is,
I wholeheartedly agree. I don't even think there are social security numbers on most trust documents. So there's nothing really technically private. I mean, it may be
exactly.
private if your family members are going to fight over your money, but it's not, nobody could steal your identity with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And make sure somebody has the unlock code to your phone and the
Aha.
password to your computer. That is, you are guaranteed that as part of Rufata is
Uh,
access to a loved one's device. So you're not going to break any rules or any terms of service. So having
okay.
that unlock code, but if anybody who has a kid or a grandkid age 3 or older, somebody has the unlock code to your phone, I can promise you.
Very good point. You know what I did? We have all of our passwords in LastPass,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
password
Yeah.
vault,
Yeah.
and my brother-in-law, for various reasons, it couldn't be my sister, but my brother-in-law has this code he can use anytime if I go missing or if I die,
Oh,
and they can get in there, and that way they can see if someone's using my ATM card or my credit card, right?
so
My
smart.
my phone unlock code is in there. And of course, if I
Yes.
were not missing or alive, I would get plenty of
Yes.
notifications that someone was getting into my vault and could be able to
Yeah.
stop it. But of course, I trust him not to
Yeah.
use it unless something's wrong. But I feel like in that way, there's a ton of information in there, right?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and LastPass has its downsides. It's not
It,
perfect,
it's
but
not perfect, but it's something. It's exponentially better. I love my password manager. I use Dashlane and it has
do you love
changed
it?
my life. I love it. Yeah, it's changed my life. And last, I mean, I could go on and on about, me being on my soapbox and everything I want to say to everybody, but based on the demographic of your audience, if you have a college age child going off to school this summer,
Mm.
make sure they have a financial power of attorney and that they have a health care power of attorney as well. Because once they
Oh,
turn 18, you cannot, make decisions on their behalf medically, or, speak to their
Or
physicians.
go into their bank.
Correct. Yes.
Got
So,
it. Is there a cheap way to do that for families who don't want to pay 6 grand for an estate plan?
a lot of attorneys I know, they have specials, going to college special, and for a couple of $100s, they will do a, financial power of attorney and advanced healthcare directives.
Oh,
I know so many attorneys I know do these specials over the summer for kids who are headed off to college.
oh, great.
Yeah.
So we will link to a resource in the show notes for this conversation. I have someone in mind. Maybe after we hang up, if you have
Yeah.
someone you want to refer,
Yes.
we'll put them in the
Absolutely.
show notes. But that's
Yeah.
important. That's
Yeah.
a big deal.
Absolutely. I've got one of the attorneys I work with in Atlanta. I know she does that. She offers this special every year.
Oh,
So,
good. Great.
yeah.
Okay, so find an attorney in your state and get a healthcare directive and power of attorney for your soon-to-be 18-year-old.
Yes,
Okay.
100%.
All
And for
right.
yourself. Make it everybody go do it
Oh,
together. It's a family affair. It'll be
if
so
you're
much fun.
if you're a parent and don't have a power of attorney or healthcare directive, please, please, please go get one.
We beg of you. We
We
beg
beg
of
of
you.
you.
Yeah.
Rachel, thank you so much. It's been really great to get your insight into this very unique corner of the world you live in your professional days and hours. Where can people find out all the things about you?
All the things. You can follow me day to day on LinkedIn, Rachel Donnelly, at My Afterlight on Instagram and Facebook, or just go to myafterlight.com. And we provide free complimentary discovery calls for any executor. We have clients all over the US, so we can help you from wherever you are to help you navigate the unavoidable logistics of legacy planning or after loss.
Amazing. Thanks for being on Love Your Money.
Thanks so much for having me.